All right, so we are in chapter 4. What kind of context do you think the listener should know about where we are?
The second chapter teaches us the difference between the soul and the body, which is another way of saying the difference between spirit and matter. With that understanding, we should act in this world very duty-bound, not neglecting our duty, but remain detached from the results of our activities. In a nutshell, that's chapter 2. Chapter 3, Arjuna doesn't seem to have understood these points completely from Krishna. He expresses that by asking Krishna, hey, you give me equivocal instructions. Please tell me definitively what's best for me. That was a clear indication that Arjuna was quite bewildered and not able to fully understand Krishna's message in chapter 2, because Krishna was not at all equivocal and had been very consistent and clear with his teachings. So by Arjuna asking that question, he gave Krishna a understanding that Arjuna was still quite bewildered and didn't really get. So then Krishna takes a step back on chapter 3 and talks about acting in the world alone, with the idea that you are in a place where many levels of realities are there. And the higher up you go, the better you will be. And what I mean by it is this: there's something bigger than yourself. There's your immediate level of reality, where you are interacting with the world, thinking that you are this body and you have senses and you need to please your senses and you interact with the people around you, etc. And you just go on living your life as normal. Then there's another level where, okay, where do things really come from? Where, like the food that I must eat, how does that come about? Woe is dependent on rains, Krishna says. Or who controls the rains? Woe is this higher level of reality. And so far, there are many, many, many other levels of reality. And Krishna is essentially telling Arjuna then, okay, if what I told you so far is too much, then try to understand this. There are principles that are higher than you. You're not the center of the universe. So act right. Don't be attached to your results. Like be grateful for even the food you have, because that is going on without you being the doer. And as you start to acknowledge these higher principles, it's going to take your consciousness higher up. But in the and then eventually you get your God, Krishna, right? But at this point, just concerning yourself with doing your duty and not being attached to the results. And so we can say from a very high level, again, that's chapter 3. Now, chapter 4, which is entitled Transcendental Knowledge, knowledge of Krishna. Krishna is the transcendental object here. Then Krishna starts again by talking about the intricacies of action, but this time using himself as an example of what he's been trying to teach Arjuna so far. And then chapter 4 starts. So in terms of a context, this is where we are. Does that make sense, Clem? What are your thoughts?
Yes, yeah, and I like how you brought up, you started in chapter 2 to kind of set the stage, set the scene for where we are in chapter 4. And it's been really interesting to me how the first few chapters of the Gita have unfolded, because I'm not as learned as you are with the Gita, and how Krishna didn't just come out in chapter 1 and say, hey, I'm God and this is who I am. He's kind of going step by step systematically in a way that Arjuna can absorb and understand.
Exactly. Yeah. So then I guess what we can do is read the texts that we cover in class and then go on with our realizations and Tukaram's teachings on them. We took a step back. Tukaram thought would be valuable for us to take a step back in the texts and get a rhythm again, starting from text 9, which says, chapter 4, text 9, one who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode. Text 10, being freed from attachments, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me. Text 11, as all surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects. 12, men in this world desire success in fruitive activities, and therefore they worship the demigods. Quickly, of course, men get results from fruitive work in this world. Text 13, according to the three modes of material nature and the work associated with them, the four divisions of human society are created by me. And although I am the creator of this system, you should know that I am yet the non-doer, being unchangeable. Text 14, there is no work that affects me, nor do I aspire for fruits of action. One who understands this truth about me also does not become entangled in the fruitive reactions of work. Text 15, all liberated souls in ancient times acted with this understanding of my transcendental nature. Therefore, you should perform your duty following in their footsteps. Text 16, even the intelligent are bewildered in determining what is action, what is inaction. Now I shall explain to you what action is, knowing which you shall be liberated from all misfortune. And then the last text we cover, the intricacies of actions are very hard to understand. Therefore, one should know properly what is action, what is forbidden action, and what inaction is. So those are the texts that we cover in class this past Friday. And let's start with you this time, Kim. What are your thoughts?
Well, I like the theme about detachment, because doing your duty while being detached, because that's open to so much interpretation when you're not educated about Krishna's understanding and Krishna's teaching about this. So going into detail about kind of setting the stage of Krishna being the perfect role model of how to be in this world but not of this world. And he's not necessarily encouraging us to worship God and love God. He's just kind of setting the stage like, okay, Arjuna, you're having challenges following through with this battle, and let me kind of outline and give you examples of what it looks like to do your duty but be detached. And so I just like the fact that he's going into this much detail about what that looks like, and we have a better understanding of what our saints and sadhus and sannyasis, kind of what their mindset is, where yes, they're in this world, but they're totally not of this world. So
Yeah, chapter 2 and 3, it's is made out of this principle in large. Not that there's certainly more teachings up to now, starting in chapter 2 to where we are now. There are quite a few more teachings, but certainly this is one of the main teachings. I would say it's like top 2, if anything. And what was very clear in my mind as I was going through class on Friday is that Krishna really wants us to understand this point. Now, this is chapter 4. We are almost halfway through chapter 4. And this has been one, perhaps the major lesson that he has given us. Obviously, in chapter 2, there's the huge one, which is we are not this body, we are eternal spiritual souls. So that's definitely a big teaching so far. But right along with that, because then the question arises, right? Okay, so if I am not this body, if I'm a eternal spiritual soul, then what do I do while I'm here? This is such a foreign place for me to be. So what do I do while here? And now we've been addressing this topic for a long time. And again, here we are in chapter 4, and Krishna still, from a different perspective now, elaborating on this idea of acting in the world, but not being attached to the results. And this time, like you mentioned, even using himself as an example. When he says, check text 13, according to the three modes of material nature and the work associated with them, the four divisions of human society are created by me. And although I am the creator of the system, you should know that I am yet the non-doer, being unchangeable. So the modes of material nature, as we have touched on it a little bit, and as we're going to see in the future in the Bhagavad Gita itself, is essentially one of the most powerful forces in the entire universe. The three modes under which everybody operates. We're talking about up to demigods like Brahma and Lord Shiva, who are the top beings in our universe. They are subject to these modes as well. So Krishna is really saying, hey, I created this system, but this is not just, a Amazon retail shopping system. This is the system. This is the universal system that Krishna created. So I'm the creator of the system. And although I am the non-doer, and I'm unchangeable. So meaning he's not feeling that, oh, I'm going to change my position because this is my creation and I'm going to be super attached to what happens to it. He is unchangeable. He's still remaining aloof from this microcosmic creation. But now he's telling us, and you should do the same in your smaller microcosmic worldview. So he's now using himself as an example. It's like, hey, not only I'm telling you to do this, but I myself acting this way. And all the intelligent people in the past have acted in this way as well. So get this point and understand it and act in this way. And I think, we call this transcendental activities. The word transcendental, it could be up to interpretation. Like, what does it mean to be like a transcendental activities? It sounds very esoteric, sounds very intricate, a bit abstract also. And one of my realizations here is that the transcendental nature of our activities here is itself the action, not the action, is itself our non-attachment to the results of our actions. Like, that's really what it means to perform transcendental activities at this point in Gita, to act, but not be attached to the results. Why would one act in this way? Because one understands, I am not from here. I don't belong here. I am a spirit soul. And I am going to act in the system because I am in the system. And in this way is very much related to the teachings of chapter 3, right? I am in the system. The system is a higher reality. It was created by Krishna. And I am, although I don't belong here, nevertheless, I currently find myself in here. So the best thing is to act very duty-bound, like do my duty, act properly, to set an example to others by not neglecting my duties. But if I am not from here and I'm simply acting according to the system that has been created by a higher reality than me, then the results of my actions shouldn't really impact me because I'm only acting according to the system, but I'm not from here. And if I act with this understanding, we are calling that transcendental activity. So it's a really important point that Krishna really wants us to understand. What do you think?
Yeah, that's interesting that you point that out, because you're right. Transcendental, even the word is very abstract, very lofty to me. like, oh, I could never be transcendental in this lifetime is kind of how I think. But when you lay it out like that, like, okay, this is what it looks like. It is possible, it is attainable, then it makes it more relatable and something that I could actually strive for in this lifetime.
That's a big part of what I like in our tradition is that these concepts are all fleshed out. Concepts such as what does it mean to be spiritual? What does it mean to be transcendental? What does it mean to attain liberation? These concepts are very esoteric, and nowadays, due to the negative way in which we see the word religion, people shy away from saying I'm religious, but they have no issues saying I'm spiritual. Well, what does that mean? Like, if you are spiritual, that's teaching number 1 of chapter 2. We are spirit, not matter. But what does that mean? I'm being spiritual, right? And yeah, transcendental, like transcendental here, like you said, I think your observation was really powerful. Everybody can be transcendental. It's simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. You do your duty and you don't attach to the results. You being a transcendental being. And Krishna says, intelligent people that acted like that in the past attain liberation. So Krishna is categorizing people who act in this transcendental way as intelligent and who ultimately going to attain liberation. So from so many point of views, this is a really important teaching, a really important point. And something else that makes me realize the value of our tradition is that in my Christian background, there was the priest in the church. And that priest, even in their teachings, there was more or less the message that Jesus Christ is a very high figure and that it's not really our place to try to imitate Christ. In fact, some sectors of Christianity will go to such an extent as to say that if you try to act like Christ, that's a sin. That's blasphemy. Like, you're not even supposed to want to be like, who are you to try to imitate or mimic Jesus Christ's actions? It's a sin. It's a sinful activity for you to even think that you can be like Jesus Christ. Are you familiar with these teachings in Christianity?
Yes, yeah, I grew up with that as well. So.
Right. So then, of course, that's Christ, right? The highest. But then the priest in our church, that was also the clergy, right? The ones that are leading the church. There is also this big separation. Well, they are very learned, they are very saintly, they are the priest, they're conducting the sermon and so on. But we are the congregation, and we are different. They are higher, we are lower, and there's this difference between us. They are wise, they read the Bible, they understand, but we go to work, we have families, we are different. And to me, that's what I was presented with up to that point, and I was born into that. I critically never saw any faults with it. But in our tradition, not only we are expected, meaning the congregation, we are expected to engage in the same activities as our leaders. The vows that our leaders have taken are the same vows that we have. The 4 regulative principles, which we've covered before, the sobriety, which means you don't intoxicate yourself, faithfulness and cleanliness, so that means you don't engage in sexual activities outside of marriage, also honesty and purity, right, that you don't gamble, and compassion and non-violence, which means you partake in a vegetarian/vegan diet, but you do not eat killed animals. So these 4 vows that we vow now to do, along with the vows that we vow to do, with one of them is to chant 16 rounds of our mantra, to read our scriptures, study them as we're doing now, and to associate with people with God inclinations, right? Those are the things that we vow to do. Well, that's our leaders, our gurus, our spiritual teachers, our temple presidents. That's what they're doing, and that's what we are doing. So there's no difference there. Now, the only difference is in the sincerity, the level of sincerity that we take as we follow our vows. Now, if you go even higher, now you get to Krishna, again, you see an expectation that there is no difference in our actions, in our consciousness, because Krishna is now using himself and clearly stating, I am acting in this way as while in the world, and you should too. So this difference between, how Christ acted, how the priest from our local church acts, and then how I act is eliminated, because from us to our gurus to Krishna, we are all supposed to be acting in the same way because we share the common spiritual nature. So that's really what it means to be spiritual. We act according to the source of our spiritual nature and energy, which is Krishna. He acts like that. So for us to be spiritual means we will act like Krishna. And for us, for example, if I'm going to be fire, then I have to be hot and I have to give out heat and light. Otherwise, I'm not being fire. So if I'm going to be spiritual, then I will act like Krishna. This is how Krishna is acting, and we're expected to act in the same way. This is a system, I believe, allow us to really make spiritual progress. One defect I see, now that I'm pretty clear that I am criticizing the structure where either God or your Messiah or your prophet acts in a very high way, but that's really not for you. Then there's your priest, which is like in between, but even the priest is something higher, it's not really what you're doing. You expect more out of them than you expect out of yourself. And then there's you. When you find yourself in that position, it's so easy for us to hide behind all these veils, all these doors. Well, but my priest shouldn't get angry or be lusty or be greedy or be fearful, and definitely not Jesus Christ or Muhammad or Moses, etc. But me, well, somebody cuts me off in the freeway, I still get angry. If I don't get my promotion and my job, I'm still upset. I'm still jealous from whomever else got it. If I see the member of the opposite sex by me, I'm still having lusty desires and so on. And that's just me, and that's okay, because I'm not the priest. I'm not the prophet. I'm fallen, and I need somebody else to help me out, such as Christ, who died in the cross for me, for my sins, so that I'm forgiven because of that. Well, right in here, I just realized this right now at this moment as I was speaking this, right within the text that we just read is a confirmation of the point that I'm trying to make here, which is 4:13, no, where is it? 4:11. Krishna says, as all surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. So what does that mean? Krishna is saying, hey, as you surrender unto me, I reward you accordingly, which means there are different levels of your surrender. And the more you act like wise spiritual people, even like me, he puts himself out there as an example. And the more you act like this, then I reward you accordingly, which is Krishna's expectations even. He wants to reward us with liberation and love and compassion and spiritual existence, which is free from death and confusion and old age and diseases, all the miseries they're experiencing. He wants us. And it's up to us, because we have free will, to act in this way or not. And the more we act in this transcendental way, the more we get rewarded. It makes sense. It's a fair system. So Krishna is making himself as an example. Our gurus, they are a living, practical example right in front of us for us to imitate, for us to act like them. And now it's on us. You know, we have our free will and we should act according to our best knowledge. So this is something that I really appreciate in our tradition as well. Starting from Krishna to our gurus, these are people that we are supposed to act like so that we can evolve, so that we don't have to think, well, religion, spirituality is really, you know, for older people. I'm still got a job to work. I still got family to take care of. And maybe when I get older, I start taking it more seriously. Krishna is saying, no, like right now, anytime, act transcendental. It puts the responsibility on our hands. And I think at large, our society can benefit from understanding the intricacies of responsibility and not shying away. You know?
Yeah, that's a really good point about how in, say, Christian traditions, there's such a divide, such a hierarchy. And it, at least to me, it keeps God so far up above and so unattainable or unrelatable. I don't know what the right word is, but that whole divide between a big God and a little me, it doesn't invite intimacy or love easily. Because my parents, when I was growing up, it was always, oh, we love God. You should love God. We all love God. But when you break it down, what kind of a relationship, love relationship is it? It's not very intimate. It's full of fear. And yeah, I agree. It does give people excuses to be like, oh, well, I'm not a minister. I'm not a priest. So I'm just going to keep doing this over here. And I shouldn't be expected to do more. And so our tradition, as you said, just makes it so attainable at whatever level you're at to jump right in.
Right. Prabhupada oftentimes gave examples of a big fire. And then, you know, as wood is burning, you hear this noise of little pieces of wood that burns away and then it flies away from the fire. Well, originally, as it was a small part of the whole, it was hot like fire. But then because it went away, that little tiny piece of wood, in a short amount of time, it loses its heat and its light because it's away from the whole. But when you put it back, again, it regains its heat and its light. The idea here is what we were talking about earlier. This concept, oh, I'm spiritual, I'm transcendental. Like, what does that mean? If I am fire and I went away from the whole and I lost my fire, I lost my lights and I lost my heat, then if somebody would try to help me and say, hey, you know what? You're really fire, but now you have lost your heat. You should go back to your nature. You should go back to where you came from. But in order for you to do that, you're going to have to become hot again. Like in the example I'm bringing up, you have to become spiritual again. You have to spiritualize yourself so you can go back to the hole that you came from. So similarly, if, you know, I'm having a what if such a conversation could take place, right? So if somebody could talk to fire and try to act in a compassionate way towards that little piece of fire that came away from the whole fire, and you say, you know what, your real nature is to be hot. Like somebody would tell us, your real nature is to be spiritual. And in order for you to regain that spirituality, in order for you to regain the hotness of what you really are, you have to again become hot. You have to again become spiritual. And Krishna is saying, here I am. I am the source of all spiritual life. And I'm acting in this way. And in order for you to attain this nature again, you have to act like me. You have to become hot like me. You have to become spiritual again like me. So he really sets out this path in front of us. And then it's our choice now to follow or not. But one thing certain, we know the results of us not following. That we know, that there's no doubts. We have had experiences of what it's like to be in a material body, in a material world, ourselves. And we can very easily see what happens to others around us in material bodies, in a material creation. We live life with ups and downs, with pleasure, pains and pleasures, with love and hate, with light and darkness. And due to the influence of time, we age. And at some point, given enough time, we are forced out of our material body. And we can let go of things in a easy, understandable, like in a knowledgeable way, or we can let go of things in a difficult and very attached and very painful way. But not letting go is not an option. I'm actually paraphrasing Tucker around here. We can let go elegantly, or we can let go in a ugly way, meaning let go of our material existence. But not letting go is not an option. And that's essentially the conclusion. That's what's going to happen to all of us in this material life. So with these examples and teachings and Krishna putting himself out there as an example for us, and we're now left with our free will, we can either act like this or not. That's what I would offer us to think. Okay, what if I don't? What if I think, you know, Krishna, okay, this is all good, but how can I act and not be attached? Like I have to have passion. I'm driven by passion. I'm driven by my desire to achieve and compete and win. How can I not be attached to the results? You know, that's too much for me. I'm just going to be spiritual. I'm not going to try to define what it means to be spiritual, what it means to be transcendental. It's my own truth. I'm going to be loving change in the world in the way I want to see it, but this is too much. I don't want to deal with all that. Okay, one may think that way. And that's the result. But if Krishna is right, if Krishna is God, if what he's teaching us is indeed going to take us to a best place, that will be our greatest loss. So this is a tremendous teaching, and we do have free will, and to try it out and verify for ourselves the results, it will be our greatest gain.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was also interesting in class how Tukram pointed out how we all come into this world at different stages of karma. So someone could say to you, oh, Tadeo, like you have a beautiful family, a good job, nice home. It's easy for you to be spiritual and study the texts versus me, I'm unemployed and blah, blah, blah. And I thought it was nice how it was pointed out how Krishna is a part of every aspect of life, where there are people who worship demigods instead of Krishna. Krishna created those demigods, so they're still connected to Krishna in some way. And it really kind of hits home that point to me of how attainable this is, no matter what circumstance we're born into in life and what challenges and struggles we're having, we're all connected to Krishna in some way. So it's not just for the people who have stable lives and stable jobs.
This was the second part of the verse that I quoted twice, but I didn't get into the second part because of this philosophical aspect of it, which is 4:11. Krishna says, as all surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects. Like, what does that mean, right? Everyone follows my path in all respects. Even those that are unemployed, are they following Krishna's path? Those that seem very angry or lusty or greedy, are they following Krishna's path? Yes, they are, because Krishna says, I created this entire system. And whether you're going backwards or forward, it is still my system. Like we can think of like a highway, right? Like when you get on your car and you're driving the highway. So here we are in California, Southern California, and most people are familiar with the 405 highway. If you are from another state, just think about the most prominent highway you have. Well, you can be going north or you can be going south. You can be going east or west in that particular highway. However, it is the highway. It's still the same highway. The highway was made by our local governments. It is the same system, whether we are making progress and going up to the higher planetary systems, or we are degrading in our consciousness, becoming more envious, more hateful, more lusty, more greedy, and therefore going down to lower planetary systems. Still, lower planetary systems, earthly planetary systems, and heavenly planetary systems, they're all Krishna systems. So whether you're going up or down, you're still in Krishna system. What I think it's very powerful about this realization, I think is very connected to what you said, Kim, is that no matter what your circumstance is, you can be acting in a transcendental way, no matter what. Even if your circumstances are less than ideal from a material point of view, you can be right where you are, know that this is Krishna's system and that there's no escaping that. Krishna is the creator of it all. That if you are suffering some unfortunate reactions, that's your karma. But that karma is also Krishna's system. And that is the unfortunate reactions that will allow you to recognize there must be a better way for me to live life, because the current circumstances are not appropriate. There's too much suffering. And you then become very introspective. That's therapeutic. That's love, I would argue, as a father of 3. When my children misbehave, I put them in a timeout, which causes them pain, suffering. According to their age, the suffering that they're experiencing by being in timeout when all the other friends are outside playing and having fun is a tremendous suffering. But that suffering will teach them how to act properly, how to behave nicely, so that they are able to then go and enjoy and have fun in a civilized way. But as a parent, I would subject my child to the least amount of suffering that is necessary to bring about the greatest good. So you will be the least amount of suffering with the intention to bring about the greatest good. Never eternal, never more than it should, and there's definitely an end. But there is that benefits from this suffering. So if a person who are in this less than ideal situation from the material point of view understands this point, this is Krishna's system, and I'm in the wrong side of it now. And I will now start acting according to this knowledge that this is Krishna's system, and I will not be attached to the results. It will help anyone at any point.
Yeah.
So it can be valuable for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. And there's no favoritism. Like, it's not that, oh, you have a better chance or you're more favored by Krishna and can better become detached. Everyone
Correct.
has an equal amount. We take a few steps, rewards us accordingly, according to our choice. It's our choice.
Correct.
What we want to do.
And then here, really to highlight this aspect of Krishna making himself an example, on 4:14, he says, there's no work that affects me, nor do I aspire for the fruits of action. One who understands this truth about me also does not become entangled in the fruitive reactions of work. So that's like right in the forefront right here. Krishna is saying, hey, I don't aspire for the fruits of actions, right? And if you understand this truth about me, you're going to act in that same way. So yeah, it's, let's dig into that. Let's make it a little bit more personal, Kim. When you hear this, how do you think you should model your life? Like your action, like the way you act in the world? Like, what would it be like for you to act, but not be attached to the results of your actions? Like, I think there's value in doing that because, again, we're trying to problematize it, right? This is a big part of what our teacher Tukaram does. Because we're reading this and we're saying, hey, let's just act, but not be attached to the results. And one may think, yeah, okay, sure, I can do that. Like, well, it's not that easy, right? So that's my intention. Let's get a little bit closer, right? Let's get more intimate here. Like, what would it be like for you? Like, what would be the challenges that you think you would face as you're trying to internalize these teachings and make them practical in your life?
I like this exercise. This is a really great idea to make this more relatable, because even the phrase fruit of actions, the fruit of your actions, can be a little, at first for me, it was a little bit confusing. Like, what does that mean? So for me, an example would be, say, this podcast. I really enjoy talking about the Gita and spirituality and our tradition and learning more about it. And so being attached to how many people watch it or how the numbers grow, that sort of thing, is letting go of that aspect of where I want the result to be versus just showing up and doing it and just leaving it at that. Another example is with my job. Showing up every day feeling that, oh, I want this raise, or I want this promotion, or I want this project, or versus just showing up and realizing that I can do so much good with the money I make from this job to help the temple, help the community, help out our outreach. That's another example for me. So,
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And with that, with the understanding that we should not be attached to the results, right? How do you see that? It's like, okay, then I'm not going to be attached to the results, but what is the impetus? What do you think is in it for you or for Krishna? I'm kind of revealing where I'm coming from here a little bit. Like, why would we do that, right? Like, who gains from it? Like, what is the understanding that allows you to act in that way? Let's
for
say
my
the
job.
podcast. Yeah, let's say the podcast.
Oh,
Let's
for the
say our
podcast.
numbers don't grow, right? Nobody's watching us or listening to us, let's say. What makes you detach from that? Why would you do that? Like, what is in it?
Well, I look at how it even started, the podcast, where I had this idea and I wasn't feeling a lot of traction or motivation towards it. I thought I didn't see really a solid purpose behind it. I felt the energy behind it would kind of dwindle. And then you approached me with this new idea of having a discussion format, talking about the Gita class. And I really felt it was, not to sound egotistical or anything, but I felt it was a strong message of encouragement for how this could be an outreach medium for people. And this format appeals to me, my technical side. And so I just felt inspired that this was what we should do. And so that's the motivation. Is me, it's a little bit selfish in that I do learn so much from you and Varangi. And I really enjoy talking about the Gita, going over class and hearing your realizations, things I missed, things that are emphasized, and just knowing that I do see the numbers and it is growing slowly but surely. But even if it's just a couple people, like those steady numbers, the people that tune in every week, the people that download every week, for them to perhaps get a little something out of it, I think is it's very rewarding.
Right. So let me point the fingers at myself now. Definitely the podcast here, but we already elaborated on this, so I'll talk about my job. So as I mentioned before, I have a product we've been developing for quite some time for eye care professionals, and my competitive nature that I developed by playing basketball for so long is definitely a big part of what I do in my company now, where I want to compete against the people in the same space as me, right? People that are providing other systems for eye care professionals. And I want my system to be better than theirs, right? And sometimes it's not. Sometimes I'm talking to a prospect and they get a demo from my system, they get a demo from another system, and they tell me, hey, we like the other system better. And I'm like, oh, how can you like the other system better? Ours is much better. But then I get super attached to that, right? So to me, it's like, no, I will create, along with my team, the best possible system. Whether people like it or not, I won't be attached to that. Okay, that's the theory. But in practice, right, that's really what I was trying to get into. What is it, a philosophical understanding? And if so, what is it that allows me to act this way in a sincere way, in an honest and practical way? To me, what helps me with that is this understanding that I live in a world where many levels of reality exists. And there's lower animal life, lower than us, humans. Then there's us, humans. Then there are demigods. Then even within demigods, there are higher demigods, right? And there's the transcendental spiritual realm. So there is something much greater than myself. And what I am doing, if I'm doing my activities, my duty, according to how Krishna wants me to do it, which is to really engage and not be lethargic, but do it with enthusiasm, then whatever happens is part of a much greater picture than I can possibly see or imagine. And the mini me who would want things to go in a particular way doesn't matter. So I give up my attachment to the results because I know that as long as I'm doing my part, Krishna is definitely doing his part. And the results of my activities, whether it's going left or right, is not for me to understand what's best. I don't understand. Krishna understands. So if I expect the results to be right, but then the results are left, I try to act with the understanding that left is actually what's best, not right, what I had in mind, because of this much higher reality of which I'm a simple part and I cannot see the greater picture. But things going left, which is contrary to what I wanted them to go, which is right, is actually what's best because I don't have the ability to see the bigger picture. But I do have the ability to realize what it is that Krishna wants me to do within the small role that I play in this great reality. And that philosophical understanding helps my psychological sufferings when things don't go the way I want them to go. It's like, okay, I give up. I offered those results to Krishna. I was having a conversation with my dear friend, and we talk about this point. And I mentioned that, you know, I got a realization in Gita class where we are detached from the results of our actions. Like we don't care about the results of our actions. And he pointed out to me that, yes, I understand that point, but I see it in a slightly different way, which is, it's not necessarily that we don't care about the results, and in that sense, being a little bit callous or cold-hearted towards the results, but is that the results themselves, we look at it and we treat them as an offering to Krishna, as an offering of love to Krishna. Because Krishna is saying, no, you act, but you don't be attached to the results. So if I act and I want things to be right, but things turn out to be left, and I remain unattached, I say, okay, Krishna, then left, the results being left is my offering to you. And even that can be my offering to Krishna. Like, you know, like Krishna says, everybody follows my paths in all regards. So even the contrary results that I attain can be my offering to Krishna. And in that sense, it's not that I'm callous towards the results. I do care about the results, but I care about them in this secondary, in this indirect way, in this way that, okay, the results doesn't matter, but it does matter that there are some results and I'm offering that to Krishna by means of remaining unattached to the results.
I think that's a beautiful sentiment about instead of just looking at the results and just walking away from them, whatever they are, to actually embrace the results, whatever they are,
Exactly.
and as an offering. I like that a lot.
I think embracing the results is a very good way to phrase it. And like, no, we embrace it, even if it's not what we expected. We embrace that because that result is the result of me acting in the way Krishna wants me to act. Like similar to Arjuna. Arjuna didn't want to kill the beloved people that was right before him in the battlefield, but he did it anyways. And that result was Krishna's plan. And that was Arjuna's offerings to Krishna, even though it wasn't what he wanted. So again, it's not that we don't care about the results. We care, but not that we care from an egocentric position, right? That I care like, oh, I wanted things should be this way. It's like, no, Krishna wanted the results to be X, Y, or Z. So even though I may have an inclination towards X, what Krishna wanted is Z. So I'm going to give Z and I'm going to offer that to Krishna as well. So then I care, because that's the results of me acting in the way he wanted me to act.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Well, as we are wrapping up today's episode, I really liked your question at the end of class. And I thought maybe you could go into it a little bit more about how this is foreshadowing of bhakti.
sure.
We're not quite there.
Yes. So there is another text here that I can use to introduce this topic, which is text 10. Being freed from attachments, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me. So here Krishna is talking about attaining transcendental love for him. Then Krishna says, one who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take birth again in this material world, but attain my eternal abode. So Krishna's activities, he is highlighting it. I appeared here, I created the entire universe, but I feel like I'm the non-doer, I'm detached, and you should act in that way as well, except I'm acting from the universal perspective and you're acting from within your smaller perspective, but we are acting the same way. And if you do that, you attain liberation. Text 15, Krishna says, all liberated souls in ancient times acted with this understanding of my transcendental nature. Therefore, you should perform your duty following in their footsteps. So liberated souls in ancient times acted with this understanding of Krishna's transcendental nature. In this point of Gita, Krishna's transcendental nature is that he's capable of creating the entire universe, which is a tremendous accomplishment, a tremendous activity. And yet he's unattached. That's how transcendental he's been. If I act in that way, then I attain liberation. So Krishna states that here, all liberated souls acted in this way. But attaining liberation is different than attaining love for Krishna. Love for Krishna would allow us to also attain liberation, because if at the time of our passing, when we leave our bodies, if we have Krishna consciousness, which means consciousness of loving Krishna, that means we love him, we also going to attain liberation, but due to our love for Krishna. While here in chapter 4, Krishna is talking about, again, remember in chapter 3, we take a step back where we're going back to only focusing on how to act and not be attached to the results. So Krishna is saying, hey, if you do that, you can attain liberation. So now, this is foreshadowing of bhakti that is to come in the future, where we are going to be acting according to our duty and not attached to the results, but we're going to be doing that out of intense love for Krishna. And that love, it's what our current actions will become later in the future. It's not going to be just about acting, but not being attached to the results. It's going to be acting because you are in love, because you are in love with Krishna. The impetus of your actions will be love for Krishna. Whereas here, there's more or less an implication, it implies that you can act but not be attached to the results so that you attain liberation. It's more like egocentric. You want to attain liberation. But this is a helix, like Tukaram oftentimes talk about a helix, where we're talking about the same thing, but moving forward. So helix is a circle that as it spins, moves forward. So it's foreshadowing of bhakti, because in the subsequent chapters, we will see just that our actions aren't just meant for us to attain liberations, but our actions are based on our love for Krishna. And therefore we attain him, we attain bhakti, which also gives us liberation as a side effect. So my question was to confirm that with Tukaram, that this is indeed that Krishna is laying out these two different paths. He made a distinction between the two, and essentially Tukaram, believe, agreed with that by adding the point that it is foreshadowing nevertheless. It's not that Krishna is going to stop here. Just act, don't be attached to the results, and you attain liberation. Now that's part of it, but in the future becomes bhakti, becomes pure love.
Such a
Does
nice,
that answer your question?
Yeah, it's such a nice evolution, like
Yes.
a foundational step for the next.
Correct.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. I
Of
look
course.
forward to the coming texts, the coming chapters.
So do I.
All right. Well, thank you for joining, and we'll see you again next week.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.